Israel has eased its blockade on the Gaza Strip. Not by as much as some would like, but the Middle East envoy Tony Blair says it is a good start. It follows the death of 9 Turkish activists killed by Israeli soldiers when they raided an aid flotilla as it tried to break the naval blockade of Gaza. Ken O'Keefe, my guest today, was on that boat and involved in the violence. So was it worth it? Ken O'Keefe, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you for having me.
The blockade on Gaza has now been eased. So do you consider what you did a success?
Well, I consider the easing to be unacceptable. I consider that to be a euphemism for there's still a blockade. The blockade is unacceptable in every way, and until it's completely broken, then there is no success. On that day, there'll be partial success, but ultimately the goal is not just the ending of the blockade, but to have real stability, security, and peace in that region. So until we achieve that, there is no success.
Do you think that partial success, as you call it thus far, was worth the lives of 9 Turkish men?
Absolutely, and I say that not lightly at all, because Palestinians die every day, and we don't hear about them in the news like we've heard about them in the flotilla. And it seems as if the Palestinian lives don't equate to non-Palestinian lives. I don't agree with that. Palestinian lives are every bit as precious as every other person's life, yet they die on a regular basis.
But aren't there other ways of doing it? 9 men lost their lives. Isn't there another way to convince Israel to ease its blockade?
Well, there's no question at all that before this flotilla happened and the violence that Israel perpetrated on that ship, there was no real talk of ending the blockade, easing the blockade. America was standing behind its policy of supporting Israel unconditionally. The Egyptians were collaborating with the Israeli and American policy in keeping Rafah closed. And ultimately, there was no real talk from the EU or the United Nations. So only because people have died and done what they are capable of doing do we see any real movement at all. I don't know how we can possibly ignore that.
Let's turn to what happened on that morning when the Mavi Marmara was boarded by Israeli soldiers. The Israeli Defense Forces released video that they have obtained of the event, and we can take a look at it here now. Where were you at the time? Were you on the top of the ship?
I was one deck below the top deck where the commandos are coming down.
What the Israeli Defense Force say about this is that, and it's clear from some of the video, that it was when the first soldier came down that he was attacked.
Yeah, what the Israelis are not revealing is all the footage that would not support their whole idea of what happened on that evening. There's lots of footage that has been confiscated and is held in control of the Israelis. I saw one dead body before I came into contact with the first commando that I helped to disarm. And he was shot right square in the forehead, and I know this man was a photographer and was not holding any weapon at all. Before they started coming from the helicopters, they came from the boats at the sides and were firing percussion grenades. They were also firing rounds, which it would appear have been live rounds as well. And ultimately, they were using all means to cause disruption and chaos. It was an attack. It wasn't a boarding, it was an attack.
Israel says that when they went on board, they used rubber bullets and paint guns, which they used for riot dispersal. And it was only when a firebomb was thrown at them that one of their soldiers was stabbed, and when their pistols were taken off them, that they used live ammunition.
You know, Ehud Barak said before we let out on that mission that they would use any means to stop us, and at any price they would stop us. That's his declaration before we headed out. The Israeli lies are continuous and incessant, and the ultimate proof of that is that they will not allow the evidence, which would be counter to their argument, to be released. They control all of the evidence that's being released at this point.
But what is clear from those videos, and there's videos available as well, where you can see somebody, and it would appear to be the first soldier, as soon as he lands, he is being beaten. A second one come down, the same thing happens.
You know, I actually don't have any problem with acknowledging that. It's pretty clear from the video, and what I will do is use Gandhi as an example. I subscribe to Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence first and foremost, but under certain circumstances, i.e. when you're being attacked and people's lives are at stake, You have every right to defend yourself, and I shall
That
quote.
is exactly.
Let's watch this then.
Well, let's watch this. But that is exactly the argument that Israel itself would use. I mean, this has been the writing on the screen was put there by the Israeli Defense Force, but it's clear what you can see. The Israeli soldiers are being attacked, and their argument is they were only acting in self-defense.
Sure. And you know what the problem is with that argument? The problem is that there are 1.5 million people in Gaza, among them 800,000 plus children. Children who have been subjected to medieval type situations.
We can get on to the situation in Gaza. Let's just deal with what happened on that ship.
This ship and this mission was intended to break that blockade, which is violating children every single day. Every single day.
But the intention to block the blockade, because you say, look, Israel had certain intentions before it came on board. They're saying certain things about those people on the ship. What was the intention? What did you plan before they boarded the ship?
The plan was to break the blockade and deliver aid which is critically needed to the population of Gaza, which has been subjected to an inhumane, illegal, collective punishment policy which subjects 800,000 plus children to conditions that we wouldn't tolerate for one day in Britain or the United States or any other civilized country.
If you want to win the argument, you also need to be clear about what happened on that ship.
I'm clear about it. We used non-lethal means to defend ourselves. I myself took possession of one weapon, a 9mm pistol from an Israeli commando, and I took that weapon, I separated the bullets, which were real bullets, by the way. I separated the bullets from the weapon. We, on that ship, that night, had possession of 3 Israeli commandos. 3 Israeli commandos, completely disarmed, completely at our mercy. Do you know what we did with those commandos? Do you know what we did with them?
Well, I know you eventually released them.
We released them. Does that sound like people who are hell-bent on killing Israelis and attacking Israelis?
Israel's argument, as you know, is always that it is unfair, that the true picture doesn't get seen. Who fired first?
The Israelis made it clear that they would stop us at, quote, any price. That's Ehud Barak, who needs to face war crimes charges for attacking a civilian passenger ship on a humanitarian aid mission in international waters, no less. We've heard so much about Somali pirates. What about the Israeli pirates?
Interviews with those on board in advance of it, there are those who said, and the organizer of the ship said the intention was to reach Gaza or die. Others said, either we will die as martyrs or we'll reach Gaza. And there were those on board interviewed on the ship who talked of waiting for the battle. Was that the intention? Did you expect violence? Did you want violence?
Of course not. Any person who's sane would not want violence. You'd rather justice and peace. Ultimately, the atmosphere on that ship from all the way up until that attack was very positive, very uplifted, a feeling of exercising one's consciousness and humanity. There wasn't hope that we would be attacked. Our hope was to arrive in Gaza.
Was there an expectation? Look,
No,
you're a former military man,
myself.
you're a former US Marine.
I can speak for myself. I was on the first Free Gaza mission in August 2008, August 23rd, that arrived in Gaza. 2 boats, 46 passengers. The Israelis said all the way up to the moment of departure that we were nothing better than pirates and they would treat us as such and that they were not going to allow us through. And we got through because enough of the world was paying attention. And ultimately, that's the only reason why we got through. So the Israelis were saying the same exact thing this time, but I thought, mistakenly, that the Israelis would not be so stupid as to attack a civilian ship in international waters on a clearly humanitarian mission which is intended to help people, including 800,000 plus children who were completely innocent and cannot be subjected to such treatment.
What were the preparations in advance on the ship? Preparations that, I don't know...
To defend it. To defend it.
So the images that the Israeli Defense Force have released of wooden battens, of pipes being sawn
I don't have any problem with that. The knives I have a problem with because we were specifically told not to use any knives. Knives could be lethal.
But you know that there were those on board who had knives and used knives.
Really? Where's the proof? What, from Israel? They're lying. They lie incessantly.
Are the soldiers who were wounded lying?
That they are telling the truth?
What about the soldiers who were wounded?
Those soldiers should be dead if we were terrorists. Why are they alive? Because we're not there to kill people.
You accept soldiers were shot?
No, I don't accept that.
So the soldier who says he showed...
Do you know how many soldiers died in the invasion of Gaza last year?
The point...
Do you know how they died?
I'm interviewing you. I'm interviewing you because you were involved in this.
Where's the video footage of shooting Israeli soldiers?
I'm interviewing you because you were involved.
I had a pistol in my hand. I had a 9mm pistol in my hand. I'm an ex-Marine. I've been in combat. I've served in a war situation. If I wanted to kill an Israeli soldier, I can guarantee you he would be dead right now.
How did you feel? Tell us how you felt when you were involved, because you were involved, as you say, you weren't on the top.
I felt like I was involved in protecting innocent people from dying. I'd already seen one dead body, and soon I saw several more, and this Israeli commando, for all I know, was the murderer of one of my brothers over there.
So you're holding three of them.
So disarming him was saving life,
What did you do with those
attacking.
three? You make the point that you eventually released them. What did you do with the three that you were holding?
They were given medical attention by a doctor, and that's fairly well established at this point.
Were you angry with them?
Yes, I was. Yes, absolutely. They just killed people who were on a humanitarian mission. Of course I was angry. There were a lot of angry people.
Did you beat them up?
I didn't beat them up, no. No, I did not.
What did you
but
do?
But I don't have a problem with those who defended themselves and who beat up, apparently, some Israeli commandos who were on board and killed 9 people, at least. What the hell is the problem with that?
Sure.
If somebody came in your home...
There are lots of people who would argue that, you know, that they shouldn't have done what they did. Israel might be the first to say that it regrets loss of life. But the argument is the extent of provocation. They say it was self-defense. And one of the commandos describes, the 4th commander to come down, describes landing and seeing his team leader with his own pistol being held to his head. And he says that is why he fired.
Wow.
Now, I know you weren't on the top deck, but you don't know that that didn't happen. And that would be an explanation. You're a military man. Sure. That would be an explanation of what triggered it.
The predictable consequences of what Israel did would be loss of life. And the loss of life was not on their side, it was our side. And the loss of life would have been on their side, except for we're not murderers. The Israelis are the murderers. We had 3 people, commandos, who may have been the murderers of our brothers, and they're living another day. They are going to feel the embrace of their loved ones once again, the sunshine on their skin, because we let them go.
What about the people that the other people on board that ship? Because one of the things that Israel says is that of the 700, there were 700 of you on that ship. Of that 700, 50 were extremists, as they call it. And the group that organised this, IHH, a Turkish group, has had some very extreme criticism of it in the past. And this is not just from the Israelis. Do you know enough about the people you were involved with?
You know what I do know? Israel has released a statement, the IDF has released a statement saying that I am involved in, quote, terrorist activity. I'm a radical, anti-Israeli activist, and, this is important, that I was going to Gaza to train commando units for Hamas. So, if you ask me, do I believe Israel when it repeats its lies? No, I don't believe Israel. They are lying consistently, and anybody with their eyes open can see that.
Forget Israel. Let's talk about a French magistrate, Jean-Louis Bruguière, who said of IHH that it played an important role in an attempt to bomb Los Angeles airport.
I've read that. That whole magistrate situation has been completely discredited. I invite everyone who's watching this program to go and see the evidence used by that magistrate to accuse IHH of any serious terrorist involvement. It's absolute rubbish as well.
He also talked of the leader of IHH, who was on the ship with you, that he had tried to recruit soldiers for a holy war in the 1990s.
You know what? We live in a world of Orwellian doublespeak, where the peacenik is the terrorist and the terrorist is the peacenik. I refuse to accept Israeli accusations when, in fact, they do everything they can to hide the truth. I'll quote Zippy Livni for saying in the invasion of Gaza that the Palestinians in Gaza, there is no humanitarian disaster in Gaza. This is how they feel about it, because if there was...
You don't like the French judge, you don't like Israel. What about the Danish Institute for International Studies said that the IHH was a front for funding terrorist groups?
Nelson Mandela was a terrorist, according to Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. So I guess maybe that man is falsely accused as well. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence?
But isn't this changing the ground rules? I mean, this is in terms of what these people...
Changing the ground rules?
What do you know about AHH? What do you know about what they're doing?
It's not my job to go and spend time investigating every activity of every person that I deal with. I stand by what I've done, and I am proud to have stood shoulder to shoulder with my brothers from IHH and around the world who did the right thing, who refused to accept the unacceptable.
And with Hamas?
And Hamas... You know what? The IRA is now part of the government in Ireland, but they were the terrorists of their day as well. If Hamas had been allowed an opportunity to give the political chance, the political process an opportunity, maybe they would not be involved in violent resistance as they are. However, they have never been given an opportunity at all.
This is double standards. I mean, just as...
No double standard.
Well, in terms of the way you were talking about what Israel does and what you're talking about Hamas does, people were critical of the IRA when it did what it did, and it was only when it turned to political means that it was deemed acceptable. Amnesty says of Hamas that it engaged in a campaign of abductions, deliberate and unlawful killings and torture.
I do not stand by anyone or any institution that violates human rights. However,
do
what
you
I will
accept
say,
that Hamas does?
Yes, I do, and I will say absolutely 100%, without reservation, I support the right of self-defense without any doubt. I would be involved myself in violent resistance if I were a citizen of Palestine or Iraq or Afghanistan. And if I were a citizen of the United States or Britain and someone from halfway around the world came into my country and started stealing my land and killing my family, guess what? I would defend my country as well. So I absolutely 100% defend the right of self-defense, and I will never shy away from that. I will not join the long list of embarrassments who condemn terrorism while forgetting to acknowledge that the biggest terrorist on the planet is the United States government for all of its terrorism around the world.
Do you accept that Israel has a right to defend itself?
Absolutely, every country does, and that's exactly why the hypocrisy and the lies of Israel are so transparent. Are you telling me we don't have the right to defend ourselves? When I saw dead bodies on that ship and we were hitting people with bars and sticks, we don't have the right to defend ourselves, but they do they?
Hamas doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist.
You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like the African National Congress and Nelson Mandela refusing to accept apartheid and recognize apartheid. I say that Israel, if it wants to be a genuine partner in any kind of peace, needs to destroy its whole ideology of Zionism. Zionism that makes other people goyim, who do not deserve to be in the Holy Land. That's the real problem. If Israel will embrace every people, including Palestinians, equally, human rights respected across the board, then I would challenge Hamas to change its charter and say we will acknowledge Israel. But until that time, I see no difference between Nelson Mandela and Hamas in refusing to accept apartheid or the Zionist Israeli state.
The Israeli government, their first job is to defend their citizens. They have rocket attacks from Gaza. They have intercepted, in 2009, the Frankop holding hundreds of tons of war material for Hezbollah. In 2002, the Karine A holding dozens of tons of weapons for Hamas, sailing to Gaza from Iran. They are trying to defend their right to exist. That is why their argument is it's self-defense.
And if you believe that, then I've got some swampland in Florida to sell you as well. If you wanted peace and you carried out the policies of Israel, then you'd have to believe that these people are the biggest idiots ever. It's like America saying it wants peace, yet conducting state-sponsored terrorism in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's a lie. Israel is lying. They don't want peace.
Are they lying when they say there was no humanitarian aid on the ship? Peace for Israel to them and the Zionist agenda is the end of the Zionist project. They don't want peace. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. And the policies, to any thinking person, reflect that. I can't speak for Hamas. I think that what I do know about Hamas is that they've actually done something to help their people. And they have also, I think, helped to give ammunition to their enemies by violating human rights and not doing everything that they should do to respect the rule of law. I'm not going to sit here and defend Hamas any more than I'm going to defend anyone who violates human rights. However, Hamas has done a lot to help its people, and for that it has to be given credit. And it also cannot be bought. And do you not think that the Israeli people would say that of their own government? They elected it.
I actually think that the Israeli government is a reflection of the propaganda that has made the Israeli people so ignorant of the facts.
Or defensive. They are under constant rocket attack. They feel that they
How many people have the rocket attacks killed? These are glorified fireworks against the fourth largest military in the world with the latest technology and weapons of mass destruction.
3,000 rockets out of Gaza in the last 3 years.
3,000 rockets that killed how many people?
The point is that Israel feels under threat.
I think the rockets are a desperate attack.
Tell us this. Let's go back to what was on your... Let's talk about what was on your ship, because Israel says that there was no humanitarian aid on that ship. What was on it?
We had passengers on that ship who are expressing their humanity. In a way, that's a form of humanitarian aid. That was not the primary cargo ship. To deny that the cargo ships, which were also confiscated, didn't have things like cement, didn't have things like wheelchairs, didn't have things like medical supplies, is another lie. But that's just it. Israel just lies incessantly.
So why not? If you wanted to get this human aid through to the people of Gaza, why not do what they said? Dock in the port of Ashdod in Israel and allow even an Egypt or an international organisation to deliver the aid.
Because it would be acting like a fool who believes that Israel has any intention of actually delivering all the aid that you're bringing. They don't allow cement in, they don't allow building supplies in, they don't allow all sorts of things, to the point that you have an unemployment rate that is the highest in the world, a poverty rate that's African levels. You have children who are malnourished and anemic. You have terrible, terrible hardship. Obviously, Israel doesn't want to let all the supplies in that are required.
So when Israel conducts this inquiry that it is into what happened,
it's a farce and a joke, and we all know that.
Even though it has David Trimble and Ken Watkin on it, the Canadian and
well,
Northern
you discredit
Ireland.
yourself now, David Trimble, don't you? You know?
If
Sorry.
they asked you, would you give them evidence?
Absolutely. I'm giving evidence right now. I have nothing to hide.
Would you go back to Israel to give them evidence?
I'm seriously considering that. Because you know what? There are thousands of political prisoners from Palestine, my brothers and sisters who I consider to be my family, who don't have the same opportunity that I do. They don't have that shining light on me. They don't have BBC interviewing me. Yet they're sitting there in prison, not having access to their family, and they're my brothers and sisters. So I'm thinking about it very, very seriously, even though I know there is no justice in Israel.
Do you fear for your life? You've talked about the fact that you might be on some
I
hit list.
believe in what Malcolm X said. When he was asked, what is the price for freedom? Malcolm said, the price for freedom is death. And if you're not willing to pay that price, then don't use that word in your vocabulary.
And did you think you were going to die?
Life.
Did you think when you were going to die when you were on the Mavi Marmara?
No, I thought we need to defend this ship. We need to succeed in this mission. We need to end this blockade. That was what was running through my thoughts.
You used to be a U.S. Marine. You've moved quite a long way from that.
Thank God for that.
You
Thank
burnt
God
your
for
American
that.
passport.
I renounced my U.S. citizenship formally because I do not agree to the terms of citizenship. I refuse to pay into a tax system that's being used to commit mass murder, war crimes, and crimes against humanity.
Your anger, how will you use it next?
Based on love, and that's why I do what I do.
How will you use it next? What will you do
I've been
next?
involved in a project called Aloha Palestine, a social enterprise intending to do safe trade with Gaza, to bring in items counter to what Israel is getting from Britain and the United States, weapons of mass destruction, small arms and things like that, to bring in safe trade items such as things that are needed for the civilian population to live a decent life. And that is a problem that we need to address in this world, is the absolute lack of the Palestinian people to exercise self-determination, and living on aid is not the answer. So my focus is trade. And if I can't be the director of that company...
What about the other side? Because a lot is focused on the import, getting stuff into Gaza. Surely the best thing for the Gazan people would be to allow to export all that they do.
Yeah, and they have millions of carnations that they could be exporting, and they feed it to livestock because it's not allowed out. So, is that a security measure from Israel as well?
So what do you do next? Is it another trip on a ship in to try to break the naval blockade, which will stay?
You know, I have a family. I'm a father. I have a beautiful son, a beautiful wife, and I have some responsibility to them, but I have a greater responsibility to the world that I live in. I don't know that it's possible for me to not be on the next flotilla, and I'd really like to say publicly right now, Hugo Chavez, you need to be on that flotilla. Nelson Mandela, if you can possibly do it, you need to be on that flotilla. Anyone who's serious, who has any real influence in this world, who really cares about justice, you need to be on that flotilla. We will end this blockade, and that's where I intend to be, on that next flotilla.
The chances of any of them going on that flotilla presumably were reduced when there was violence. Do you feel in any way responsible on the behalf of those on the ship for the violence that came from it?
I feel responsible for defending that ship and the mission, which was intended to protect innocent civilians who are being collectively punished in a policy which would only be considered insane by any thinking, compassionate person.
So it was worth it?
It was absolutely worth it. We need to do it again.
Ken O'Keefe, thank you for coming on Hard Talk.
Thank you.